more value you place on the next Exalted guy. I could see undervaluing this guy because if you just don't have a lot of Exalted, this card actually probably will underperform for you. But if you're drafting, with it in mind and just taking every Exalted guy, I think this guy's definitely going to make your 23.
Yep, I agree. I like regeneration in black too.
Yep, makes sense for skeletons.
Yeah, yeah, skeletons in particular.
Yes.
Because, they regenerate.
They do.
Essence Drain.
Sweet.
Yeah, awesome. Glad it's back.
Yep.
Not much else to say about it.
Mm-hmm.
Giant Scorpion.
I remember this guy being a brick house in Zendikar
Yeah.
Limited. I don't know if it's going to play out the same way.
Well, I was just about to say, it's actually this format maybe just because I was playing green-white Grizzly Bears, but it actually felt really fast. Like,
yeah.
much faster
than
than core sets or have been in the past, I guess.
Well, I felt like the Bloodthirst format was really fast. Some of the games they weren't necessarily over fast, but they felt like the hole I was in was insurmountable very early in the game. So yeah, this guy in Zendikar world where it's just all 2-1s and 2-2s bumping uglies is just is completely insane.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's going to play out exactly the same way here.
No, it's not. It's not because the 2-2s and 2-1s that would be to it have Exalted. Like, Exalted is very good against this thing.
Correct. So, still probably...
it's still quite
probably good, but it's not going to be... I would be surprised if it was the same thing as it was in Zendikar.
Yeah, I mean, Zendikar was, like, first pickable.
This is as good as a one-touch creature can get, is Zendikar.
Yeah.
It's the 2-1 and 2-2 attacking format, so...
Yeah. Harbor Bandit... What do you think
I like this cycle.
I was about to say, what do you think about this cycle? Because I actually like it a lot, even though it seems a little out there.
I'm just a pretty big fan of you want allied colors to, basically you want the allied colors to be like, hey, play us together, we work a little bit better together, we have synergies, etc., than the enemy colored things. The dual lands at rare do a little bit to get that point across.
Yeah.
In the absence of, they cut the color hosers, right? Like Flash Freeze and Deathmark didn't make the cut this time around.
I believe they did not.
Right, so you want something that indicates some of the, these are the colors that like each other, these are the colors that dislike each other. And this is also, I'm a big fan of making cards that have outputs that are pretty easy for low-level players to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's obviously not rocket science to cast this with an island in play and then be able to activate its power.
I mean, even Gerard managed to do it.
Even Gerard. So these designs are like really low hanging fruit on a number of levels. So
yeah,
I'm a big, and none of them are actually that, they're not like oppressive.
No, they're just really solid for uncommon.
Very good value and whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that cycle.
Yeah, me too. Like, when I first saw them, I was like a little taken aback because like multicolor or allied color isn't really a thing in core sets.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to accept that our old definition of core set is quickly becoming a bit of an antiquated notion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're definitely, with the change, they changed it to like every year, and they changed, X edition into Magic 20 whatever, and then they're doing more and more with it and making it a standalone limited set, which most core sets were not designed to be drafted competitively.
Or they were, but the job they did was horrendous.
Right. It's one of the two. We're not 100% sure what it is, but
yeah.
But yeah, they're putting a lot more effort into the core sets, and making them a lot more interesting for people who are around Magic rather than just making it, which is partly because we have like Duels of the Planeswalkers now, it's a lot easier to get into Magic than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can kind of have a little more fun with the core sets, make them a little more complex, a little more interesting. And I think this is a really good way to do it for the reason you described.
Yeah. Also, I mean, if the rationalization is ultimately we want to put out a fourth set for financial reasons, then you had to treat it like a fourth set.
Yeah.
You had to do, you know what I mean? So
yeah, you can't just print Grizzly Bears and Giant Growths and collect money.
Correct.
Yeah,
you could, You could once, probably,
right. Theoretically, it's
not,
possible.
Not a second time.
Yeah. Tenor says, it is. Mero just said today that Duel of the Planeswalkers is the new entry-level product for Magic. So, there you go.
Yeah, although that doesn't exactly pass the sniff test because like not everyone owns a
console
or wants to play the game that way. So
yeah. No, it's you can't just
right.
abandon your core set. Like it's still important to get people to play through the cards themselves and to get people to learn the game and appreciate it for, a tactile way.
Yep.
But yeah, like Duels does kind of open them up to have.
It is an entry product among other entry products.
Right.
And it might become the primary entry product, but it's never going to be 100% Duels. That's just not going to be the way it works.
Yep. Knight of Infamy.
I'm a big fan of Black Knight, White Knight existing in Alpha. Totally sweet designs, and Knights are very good candidates to have Exalted flavor-wise, so it makes a lot of sense to make this guy in the white version of this guy.
And
is he called Knight of Fame? Please don't call Knight of Fame, the white one.
I can't imagine it is. I want to say it's like
that would be too sweet.
I want to say it's Knight of Valor or something like that.
Well, he's the opposite, so he is the Knight of Fame.
Well, he like you said, Knights are. Oh, it's Knight of Glory.
Boo!
Boo, Wizards! Boo! You blew it. Such an opportunity.
Make the worst name of all time.
Or maybe it should be Knight of Inglory. No, Knight of Not Glory.
Right.
Knight of Anti-Glory? I don't know. Knights are cool, and I think that, like, reinventing them is cool. Like, they had the Jump Knights, and then the Pump Knights, and then... There was one more, wasn't there? Oh, I guess it was just...
some variation of the Pump Knight again.
Yeah. And then these, like... I think that's cool.
Yep.
Alright, we're ready to move on to the card that I wanted to talk to you most about.
Okay. Yes.
Liliana. I hate this design.
Okay.
I want to start with the most egregious design mistake, in my opinion, in my not professional opinion. A minus ability that has the same as the Entering Loyalty.
Well, I actually that is the something I absolutely agree with. I never liked that about Big Garrick. I think it's a mistake if a Planeswalker ever just plays like a sorcery.
Exactly.
Which is what those cards do. I don't care if Garrick would be 4 or 2 for his power. Like, development-wise, I don't care about what that is. If he was a little bit better or a little bit worse, it doesn't ultimately matter. I just think it sucks when these things play like sorceries.
Right. It's so bad.
I believe it is a design mistake to have them work that way.
They're supposed to be the face of the game.
Right.
Like, a Planeswalker is supposed to be a huge deal. Like, when you cast it, it's like, it's like casting a legend from, Invasion or something. Like, right. It's a big deal, and for it to just immediately get binned for some effect, like some...
For a terror or for a doom.
Yeah, exactly, basically. For some effect that you can easily get from a spell.
I agree. I think, and part of the rationalization for doing Planeswalkers is, and moving Magic also to a more creature-centric game, is a lot of people just feel a lot more comfortable when the cards they spent the most money on are sitting in play for multiple turns. And obviously just sorceries and instants can't do that. They're just like kind of one-shot effects or whatever. So having the Planeswalkers play that way, I believe, has the risk of significantly detracting from their splashiness or excitedness. It's possible this actually creates more net fun for people if it's -4 to do this power, even if the loyalty is the same, just because it has to be in play for 2 turns. Like, you don't have an out to give yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if you make this -4 or make it start with 4 loyalty, like it's not going to make or break the card either way.
Yeah, I wouldn't care if this, like I said, I wouldn't care if this card was better or worse.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's I don't think it's correct to have this come into play, use a power once, and immediately be destroyed. I think that's a design mistake.
I'm very glad you agree, because that's something I feel really strongly about. Like I
didn't like that about Big Garrick at all.
Yeah,
Big Garrick,
good.
I believe, was the first one that worked that way, and I didn't like it then either.
Good. It's like I'm so picky about Planeswalker design because I think it is that important. And I understand that, they're going to make mistakes because it's so new, and still, like, it was
Yep.
new when they made them, and they did a pretty good job, but they're still really hard to design because they're so different than anything else.
Yeah, and you also want each of them to be like in their own space. Like,
Exactly.
it's not acceptable. You can make Shivan Dragon and then 3 sets later make like, oh, the Shivan Dragon, but he's a colored Manamore and his fire breathing ability is a little different. And then you can
Yeah.
make Shivan Dragon with trample.
A different
Shivan
dragon,
Dragon
and another dragon. Yeah, but
whatever. You can do this over and over again, and it doesn't matter.
There's
But the
only so many
Planeswalkers need to be their own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely, and I think that this one is bad for a couple reasons, but that one is by far the worst.
Yeah.
Next,
it seems like they made a pretty concerted effort to make like Swamps Matter a black thing.
Yeah.
Liliana Shade and Mutilate as a reprint, which we'll get to in a few cards. I actually like that direction quite a bit for black to go into.
Mm-hmm.
Like the mono black control decks were always much more popular than their power level suggest, and people had a lot of fun with like the Cabal coffers into the big swingy black stuff back in the day. So I think it makes a sense to have black move in this direction where like, yep, you just want to have a bunch of swamps in play, and then sweet stuff happens for you.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird because at the lower rarities, because this like kind of reads like a green card, but I guess they're probably just gonna slowly move. Like green will just be like rampant growth and 5-color fixing, and black will be like, only ramp for swamps or only care about swamps.
Right. It doesn't really read that green to me because, like, get a land every turn. That's like not very green, right? Like there's some cards that do it, and there are a couple artifacts that do it. But that's not like really that green to me. The rampant growth and Civic Wayfarer and Birds of Paradise are more green to me.
Yep.
When I see this swamp ability, it's more reminiscent of I know this is a bad example, but like the Journeyer's Kite.
Sure.
Is more what it feels like to me, but I think I don't know. It's hard to describe, but I feel like it's such an underwhelming effect because like it doesn't feel right with the ultimate. Even though they obviously play together, like it makes sense. You get a bunch of swamps and then you make your swamps huge.
Yep.
It feels almost like they play too well together in that they're redundant.
To some extent, although like the jump from I have 7 mana to I have 28 mana is
it's pretty extreme.
It's not like jumping from 7 to 8 mana.
Right,
I mean?
right.
So
it's definitely true. It's just like I feel like it. I mean, the numbers would have to be moved around, but I would have liked it more if it was like an arena, like +1, lose a life, draw a card, or something like that.
Well, I think they wanted this one to be like a marquee Swamps Matter card, and they have the previous Liliana is like a pretty straightforward like grindy card advantage machine, so I can see, and it's like an invasive griefy card advantage machine, like it negatively affects your opponent and with all 3 of its powers. So I can see just wanting to be like, no, we're going to make this one Swamps Matter, and we're going to make it very different from previous Liliana because they are going to have the same name.
I was going to say, if they didn't have the same name, can you imagine them both in play at the same time?
Right. So, you probably want it to move it explicitly into a completely different direction than the previous Liliana, so they're not competing for slots in the same sort of decks. Now, there's naturally going to be some overlap because they're both, like, kind of powerful mono-black control-ish cards.
Yeah.
So they'll appear in some of the same decks together. But design-wise, you want them to kind of be in an entirely different space, I think.
That's fair. And, like, one thing that I think is specific to Black Planeswalkers is they've been so cautious about Black Planeswalkers. The first one was the only 5 mana one, and then the second one, like Sorin, was just unbelievably underpowered compared to Gideon and Elspeth, the Planeswalkers being printed around it, even Nissa.
Mm-hmm.
And then the 3-mana Liliana is so good. Like, I understand that they're being really conservative with them because black is the removal color, and the best way to fight Planeswalkers is creatures.
Yeah.
But it still feels underwhelming.
Well, I think a lot of it has to also do with just like, well, and part of the reason I consider Sorin to be a successful design, even though he never really made much of an impact in tournaments, is like, does this Planeswalker give you a particular feel? Like, is it telling you something, maybe not necessarily about the character, but what about, what the design is all about?
Mm-hmm.
And does it get your wheels turning in terms of how you're going to put into a deck? It's actually why I think that the Gideons and the little Lilianas and the little Jaces of the world are much more dangerous designs, because they're just like, all right, this is just guaranteed value. I'm going to get a 2-for-1 and probably prevent some damage at worst, and at best, this is like going to just carry the game by itself.
And they won't even realize it.
Right. I think there's only so many of those that you can do before they sort of start to blur together and also become just frustrating presence in tournament games.
Yeah.
And Sorin was definitely worth more money than his power level would suggest, which meant that he at least struck the right chord with the casual audience. So I think Liliana's a successful design because, at the minimum, because I heard people pre-release talking about, like, what kind of deck, how am I going to build this deck, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it was attractive enough to try to think of how to construct a deck. And if the card is doing at least that much, then it's a pretty successful design, I think.
Yeah, I think it's also important that the Planeswalkers teach you about the color that it is, or at least enforce certain ideas. The Sorin definitely did that, and this Liliana does that as well. I don't know. It's hard to express what I don't like about this besides the minus number, but it feels like it's not a Planeswalker.
No, it passes that test to me. You know who doesn't feel like a Planeswalker to me is Gideon. Gideon doesn't pass that test to me because it's not like, oh, what am I going to put in my deck to, like, make Gideon better, or how am I going to, like, synergize with it? Like, a little bit of that. It's basically like, yeah, he's just very powerful, defensive, grindy card.
Yeah.
That's good against creatures and attacking in general.
Well, the fact that he, like, makes the creatures attack it, which is a lot like blocking, and then attacks itself, it feels more like a creature than a Planeswalker.
Right. Gideon is not capitalizing on cool Planeswalker space. It is powerful, and it might be popular because people like putting cards in their deck. But as a design, I just don't think it gets it done as like what a Planeswalker should be trying to be doing. And this Liliana passes that test as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not it actually ends up making some impact in tournament level play, like, big question. You know what I mean? It's competing with little Liliana, which is just guaranteed value. And,
yeah. I'm not so worried about tournament play as I am.
I think this card's definitely going to strike the right chord with the casual audience. I don't think there's any question that people are going to want to try to build decks around this, and that it feels like doing something very, very mono black when this card's in play and you're using its powers. Like,
yeah, it's definitely true. It's not like a wow factor thing. It's just it's so hard for me to explain. I don't know. Maybe I'm just, like, off on this because, my spikiness is, like, disappointed at how not jammable it is.
Sure, but it's a mistake to make all the Planeswalkers jammable. Like, you need to have some of them to sell sets and whatever the case, but, like, I think it's a mistake if the majority of them are in that space. And I think Sorin proves that point. Like, Sorin didn't really show up very much in tournaments, but was still relatively desired, like, still sold for $10 or whatever.
It was still a good design.
It hit the right audience the right way, you know what I mean? I think
fair.
it's more important for your spread of Planeswalkers to be appealing to everyone, as opposed to just making, like, all the Planeswalkers, like, 9 out of 10 tournament level cards with, like, guaranteed value. I think that's a much bigger mistake.
Alright, yeah, I am willing to cede that. I may be biased or incorrect about that, but I'm definitely glad we agree about the most the thing I was most upset about.
I do not like minus power equal to loyalty. I do not like that design at all.
All right, good.
And I don't care if it's -2 or -4. Just make it so it's not a sorcery.
Yep.
All right.
Or make it start with 4.
Yeah, however you want to do it. Just don't have it be like this comes into play, and it's a sorcery. Now it's in the graveyard. Right. Wasn't that a cool game-changing experience when I played my games?
Yeah, it's really lame.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Liliana's Shade, Reinforce, Swamp's Matter, B mono black, and Shade always really good.
Sweet design because
designs,
you can easily imagine what you're going to do with the swamp that you could get, which is at the minimum pump of this thing.
Right.
So, sweet.
Yep. Mark of the Vampire.
I would not sleep on this in limited.
That's exactly what I thought too.
When I put this on a guy and I couldn't kill it, it was very hard to win.
Yeah,
so.
It's like
it's Armadillo Cloak.
Exactly, it's basically. Armadillo Cloak meets Vampire Nighthawk or something. It's like very, very hard to race, and there are not that many great answers to it. There are a couple, but not too many that it's like unplayable. Period.
Right. No, I think this card's like against some decks. It's I'm not necessarily sure if it's a main deck card just because that requires a lot of knowledge about what the removal and bounce, etc. is like how main deckable is Disenchant and etc. But
yeah, that's a lot of meta stuff.
Definitely as a sideboard card, this is something you should be reaching for a lot.
Yeah.
Opponents are,
There's also there's a couple hexproof guys. There's the Pro White Knight if you're against them, and there's Tormented Soul is a good target for this. I feel like I had another good target for it, but yeah, it's a sweet card. I like it.
It's good on the Shade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yep. I mean, it's I don't like when this card is at a high power level because I feel, previous cores have definitely suffered from games just being too grindy, just being like, casts more Mind Rot / Divination / Gravedigger / Haven Fishers was the person who was winning the game.
Right.
And I just don't think that's a particularly fun experience for the majority of players, but as long as it's not, M13 doesn't appear to be that big of a grind fest.
No, there's like only Ravenous Rats in this for like grind value.
Yep.
Like I don't think Gravedigger. There's a Gravedigger or it's Rise from the Grave instead.
Right.
It's
not
that grindy of a format.
It's fine, and again, like you need a core set to show off basic parts of the color pie.
Yeah.
And what color gets opposing player discards a card needs to be very clearly stated. So, Mind Rot is a reasonable card to do for that purpose. Not as long as it's not actually like ruining games of limited, which I don't think it's going to be doing in this format. I think it's about I think the 2/1 flyer for 3 in M11. I want to say the one that's the Ravenous Rat 2/1 flyer.
Oh yeah.
I thought that guy actually had a pretty ruinous effect on gameplay because like too many games just came down to I cast this guy twice and just sort of grinded / outcarded my opponent.
There was Gravedigger, Rise from the Grave, and a Raise Dead.
It was just too big of a grind fest.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Mind Rot's a fine card to do as long as there aren't a million different types of powerful Mind Rots fooling around at lower rarities.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this is the safest home for Mind Rot in a while.
Yep.
In that regard. Murder. This is one of the cards that is like, how is this not already a card?
Right. I mean, obviously Terminate was a card back in the day or whatever, but certainly this is the first monocolored version of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sweet.
It's well costed. It's
for a card that's iconic, or has the possibility of being this iconic. I think the art's kind of poor. It's like a little just like blurry and not really.
Yeah,
it's not super clear on first blush what's even going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a couple things, right? Like first, the art, like you said, it doesn't scream iconic.
There isn't even a second person in the artwork.
Yeah. Yeah, how is this guy getting murdered?
Murder implies there's at least two parties, right? There's the victim and the perpetrator of the crime. So
No, it's self-murder.
oh, okay, that's a different. That's
Yeah,
called,
if only English came up with a word for self-murder,
right.
then we could
But anyhow,
use that instead. Also, I don't think murder is the best name for a card that's going to be this presumably iconic. Like you agree with me that this is probably going to be like the core set removal spell at least
for a while, yeah, for a while certainly, I would be. I
a
would
couple
assume
more
we're gonna get
times.
at least.
Yeah.
We're probably gonna get at least 2 years of this. Would be my guess.
Yeah, and I don't think murder is the best name for that.
It also just doesn't sound like something that's coming out of, like a wizard's book. Do you
Right,
know what I mean?
right.
Like
it's a spell.
right. But whatever.
Dude, another earwig fell. Where are these things coming from?
I've never had. Since I literally even didn't know an earwig was a real thing, I'm not someone who can give you a lot of practical advice on what the source of your earwig problem is.
Fair enough. Yeah, the one thing that I do love about this card, besides that it is such a simple design, and it's one of those things that we're really happy, or that we're really surprised wasn't already a card,
Yep.
is that they didn't put flavor text on it.
Yep.
I'm very happy about that.
Especially, I thought like Lightning Bolt's reprint got spoiled a little bit by having that like hokey flavor text about referencing that it was a reprint or whatever. Yeah, so I like when these are kind of kept clean.
Yeah, I agree completely. They could have done a better job, but they could have done a lot worse.
That is a ringing endorsement.
That's what I'm gonna say about that one. Yeah, I'm ready to move to Mutilate.
Yeah, totally awesome reprint.
Yeah, perfect timing for it. It's
Swamps Matter.
Really reinforced.
Swamps Matter.
Yep, it's really reinforced in this set. It's, every once in a while they print a card where everybody's like, oh, Mono Black's back, but it's never the case. But finally they actually printed like 4 cards for it instead of just 1 or 2,
These are all incredible tools, right? Like, who knows if the deck gets there, but Mutilate and Liliana and some of the other stuff here is like, these are real cards for this deck.
They get
it's not,
Sign in Blood and Nighthawk, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that people will play it, and always happens when everyone's like, yes, Mono Black is back, and it never is that like people kind of try it and then give up on it. But there are enough tools this time around that people will keep trying it.
Yeah, I think that I would guess, I'm no expert on this kind of foresight or whatever. I would guess we're gonna have to wait a little bit because I think that Titans and Swords are probably gonna be too tough on a mono black deck for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think once we have a rotation and Ravnica's in and those cards leave, I wouldn't be surprised if that deck was for real.
Yeah.
But like Midnight Haunting, Moorland Haunt into Sword still seems like, how are you supposed to get out of this if you're some mono black deck?
Yeah.
So as long as that's still a thing, I don't think the deck's going to be that good. But we only have 3 or 4 more months of that, and who knows where we go from there.
This art is pretty creepy too.
It's not as creepy as the original art.
Well, no, but
which would be that's a hard one to top.
Yeah, it is.
Just like people just melting or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm pretty happy about Mutilate being back, even though I don't see myself playing it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not my language.
Yeah.
But no, it's a sweet reprint, and I like that it's also customizable. Like you get, unlike Day of Judgment, which is basically like build a deck with like very few creatures. You can imagine trying to build a deck where it's like, well, I have some, I'm playing some sort of like 6/6 and then casting Mutilate for 5.
Right.
Like the ability to customize your experience is a lot higher with the card. So it's a pretty sweet reprint, I think.
Yeah. Yup. Speaking of giant guys.
Yep. It's a little weird to have an Exalted trigger that references one guy in particular when almost all the other Exalted triggers
doesn't matter who's
whenever
attacking.
a guy attacks alone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, they're Rafiks, and they're not like this.
Right.
So my opponent played this, and I assumed that the first attack was causing me to Edict. But
yeah, I thought the same thing.
I can see not wanting to do that for like power level / play pattern reasons.
Right.
Just like a guy unexpectedly died, and now all my guys are locked out for the rest of the game because I can't like get 2 guys in play in one turn.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I don't think
yeah,
that would be
it definitely took
fun.
me for a double take.
No, I understand that. I mean, I thought that it did that the first time I read it too. Um, uh,